It's my honor and privilege to be able to be in conversation with two comrades whose lives and social relations embody what they are fighting for. Martin McMahon needs very little introduction for anyone who has followed the struggles of Dalits in India. In his more than 4 decades of work, Martin has worked at the local level, for example, building his organization Navsarjan in the wake of the Golana killings of Dalits in Gujarat, an organization that battles for Dalit land rights along with Adivasi rights, to the national level as the convener of the National Campaign on Dalit Human Rights, and also at the international level, where he spearheaded the civil society demands to view caste as a human rights violation at the UN conference at Durban. Martin has won several international awards that have recognized his valuable and unstinting work for social justice. Most importantly, Martin is a joy to meet, to chat, and to learn from, a trait that I believe is grounded by his firm moral compass. Dr. Roja Singh is a dear comrade and colleague, another prominent figure in diasporic and transnational progressive politics and Dalit struggles. Roja is visiting assistant professor at St. John Fisher College and works on the intersections of caste, gender, class, and religion. She has also had a long engagement with education and struggles for dignity in India, being the co-founder of the Thai Educational Hostel for Dalit Girls in Pudukkottai, India, and also president of the Dalit Solidarity Forum in the US. Apart from her various writings on caste, class, and gender, Roja's work on oral narratives and cultural expressions of Dalit communities of women in South India and other indigenous communities has resulted in a very well-received book, Spotted Goddesses, Dalit Women's Agency, Narratives on Caste and Gender Violence. I am Dr. Balmurugan Natarajan, an anthropologist and engineer by training, who has worked on issues of casteism, labor, and culture in India. I teach at William Patterson University, a working class public university in New Jersey, and take seriously what the radical Black educator, Dr. Bettina Love, names as co-conspiratorial work. So to get this panel underway, our panel, as has been mentioned, is titled #Dalit Lives Matter. It's a theme that sits at the heart of the conference's main theme of reclaiming India in this case. So let us begin, therefore, by hearing from both of you about the title of the conference, Reclaiming India. Reclaiming is, of course, an idiom of resistance to Hindutva, a Brahminical, supremacist, and ultranationalist force that is now clearly fascistic and in control of India. So from your vantage points as activist intellectuals who have shaped Dalit demands for several decades, what is in need of reclaiming by Dalits? What has been lost by Dalits, in other words? What has been taken away from Dalits? And most importantly, also by whom? And over the course of a long history of oppressions, exploitations, and humiliations.
I first of all want to acknowledge that I'm sitting on the traditional land of the Seneca Nation, the keepers of the Western Door, the original peoples of the 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. I acknowledge the Seneca community, their elders, both past, present, and future generations. And we acknowledge that many of our institutions were founded upon the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on this land where I'm sitting right now. And I want to acknowledge my ancestral lands of Sogandi in Tamil Nadu and Chengalpattu district in Tamil Nadu as well. So what was lost? I think for me, in my perspective, I believe strongly, we need to go back to talking about the whole idea of humanity and personhood. So that stands out utmost for me in every conversation that I have and every action that I'm involved in and every piece of writing. For me, the centrality of what was lost was personhood. And once you take that away from somebody, that just causes intergenerational trauma that we see today after thousands of years of endorsing such graded inequality as divinely sanctioned and lodging it into narratives that had potential that was already proven as oral tradition, right? So when there are dominant narratives that kind of stamps it as your brand that you are not a human being, then where do you go from there, right? So once that is denied, then all else is denied for you.
Well, I can say that we're talking about India. So from many, many years before independence, there was a struggle to reclaim the humanity. There was judicial prohibition on Dalits to learn. Severe punishment was inflicted for attempts to learn. You had no right to walk on the roads. There were rules as to how many meters you must walk from others so that your shadow also does not fall. There were no political rights. And the only hope was that if we become independent from the British, then you will become like citizens. So many people, including Jyotiba Phule, and then lastly, Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar, he fought on both accounts, on the political independence, not for only Dalits, but for the whole India, and also for Dalits, so that they're treated as human beings. So 1947, India became independent. 1950, we had the constitution, which for the first time criminalized practices of untouchability. That's closely 7.5 decades earlier. Today, I am coming from a state, Gujarat, not unknown to US people staying in the US from India. Both the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are from this state. So was Gandhi earlier. And is considered to be the model state. And we did a study on untouchability practices in 2010. It says that though Dalits are Hindus, in 90.2% villages, they cannot enter temples. In 64% government schools, Dalits are seated separately during the midday meal. In 54% of the villages, Dalits who may be elected in the local self-government, but they will not be allowed to sit on the chair, and the water pots will be separate. So you have the two parallel rules going on in India at the same time, the rule of the constitution and the rule of the caste. We had hoped that the rule of the caste will end in 1947. Unfortunately, all the political parties that we have today, consciously, they tried to provoke and propagate caste as a valid social political system. India cannot, it looks like today, it cannot be reclaimed unless it liberates itself from the clutches of the caste system. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, both Martin and Roja. Powerful indictments of the very state of our being, and always a good place to begin with acknowledgement of the rot that has very deep roots. So I welcome this, and I want your words to ring loud and clear and travel wide and hit deep. So let's actually continue with that and move directly to the question of equality and citizenship, and of course Manuski, or humanity, what Ambedkar called in Marathi. And in his famous resignation speech that Ambedkar made almost to this date, 69 years ago on September 27th, 1951, outside the Legislative Assembly, Dr. Ambedkar made the following remark, and I quote, "To leave inequality between class and class, between sex and sex, which is the soul of Hindu society, untouched, and to go on passing legislation relating to economic problems is to make a farce of our constitution and to build a palace on a dung heap," end quote. Those are not just memorable words, but they need to be a constant reminder about where we are headed and what we need to do. So Ambedkar was, of course, referring to the Hindu Code Bill and how the votaries of Hindutva at that time violently opposed it. We are today, I would say, in a much worse situation with all the inequalities, social and cultural, all those inequalities intact or even worsened. For example, the Anti-Atrocity Act has been diluted even more. But also many of the economic legislations that were put into place in the early days of the Republic to protect workers and the precariats, and a bulk of them are Dalits and Adivasis and Muslims. Those are also being dismantled very systematically, as with other draconian laws being passed. So what then is the reality of Dalits under the Hindutva regime? What are the possibilities for liberation? Is it, for example, education? Is it conversion? Is it policy changes in the law, social movements? Of course, all of these or something else, and a combination of any of these. I know this is a big question, but I do want us to actually talk freely about this.
Yeah, thank you, Murli, for leading us into this thought right now, because for me, looking at what Ambedkar stood for, what he stands for right now, in his language, he does use Dalit social consciousness about rekindling and reclaiming our humanity, reclaiming equality, and he was about education as well, right? So I want to go back to where I started from, because my comments are going to be centered around this dichotomy of humanized, dehumanized, right? So whose side are we on? And Ambedkar was very clear that you cannot be on both sides. You either are with, you're either like, you know, in hell or in heaven kind of a situation for him. So I think we cannot be both. And if we are, then he points out that there is a personal dysfunction, right? And a collective dysfunction as a culture, so which can only be treated if it's acknowledged and accepted as, yes, we are starting from the premise of a civilization that was founded on inequality. And unfortunately, right, it was lodged into scriptural narrative, so therefore nobody could question it. And so we have clear evidence of language that dehumanizes Dalits and others in the stories that have been passed down to us. So that permanence was ensured to us in the storytelling. And we know the power of storytelling. Once inequality is established in a story that is based and rooted in religious tradition, you cannot erase it. And I think that's what Adichie talks about also, the danger of a single story. And nobody has dared to change that story. So when Dalits are stepping up to say, we want to change that story, you know, we are demonized in the scriptures and the dominant narratives as the other, right? So we want to change the story. And when we step up to release our own language and words to change the story, then we need to be punished, right? So that's the punishment tradition that has been continuing because of this greater inequality institutionally sanctioned by dominant narratives. So, I mean, permanence was just so skillfully and so sophisticatedly done in terms of taking oral narratives, giving it written form, and making sure that it is sort of really engraved on stones where it is indestructible. So it was intentionally sort of, you know, sought after for permanence of these stories. So who dares change the story, right? I mean, if you're from Tamil Nadu, you're probably familiar with the story of the old lady who, you know, who sells the vada, and then the crow comes and takes the vada, and then the fox comes and says, "Oh, crow, you're so beautiful, sing for me." And the crow sings and the vada drops, the fox runs away with the vada. But somebody decided to change the story and say, well, the crow decided that it was not going to be fooled, and so it put the vada under its leg and sang, right? So that's subversion, right? So
Lovely.
that's subaltern power. And somebody decided to change the story, and that's the story I told my kids when they were growing up, you know. Kaka vade tukit poche, ana nari eduthu pola vadaya, you know. So that's important for us. Somebody has to change the story. And so for Ambedkar, you know, he challenged the Congress party. He says, I make only one condition. He says, tell me what I shared, where I am to have in the Swaraj. If you don't want to tell me that, you want to make up with the British behind my back, he says, hell on both of you. You know, so he did not mince his words at all when it came to claiming inequality and pointing out the fact that Brahminical elites were cohort with, you know, with the British elite as well. So yeah, so he points that out in such, you know, stark and poisonous language, actually. So, so unfortunately, that's what we're still seeing today, as Martin pointed out, in the school systems, in the health, you know, care setup, and, you know, in political institutions, you still see, you know, underrepresentation and Dalit children being shunned, right? Being shunned still as being treated as inhuman. So we're still fighting that inequality between human and inhuman.
Thank you so much, Roja. Martin?
Yeah, I see there's a fundamental problem. And I think Dr. Ambedkar had understood it very well. Unfortunately, today we don't understand it. And so under the scriptures, under Hinduism, what is upheld to be the ideal is the one who claims that I am the highest one, right? Now that's a problematic thing because to my understanding, where there is no equality, there cannot be any religion. So they themselves under the scriptures say that Hindus are basically unequal. So there's Brahmin at the top and the Kshatriya down, and within the Brahmin there are 40 kinds of people, and 6,000 conglomeration of 6,000 small castes here and there. So people who themselves do not have the religion, to expect that they can help me to reclaim my dignity is absolutely impossible. And therefore, I think that's what Dr. Ambedkar also said, is post-independence. It is not your so-called dharma which is going to liberate you. It is the constitution, because the society must be governed by the law. That's why is the law for the first time, which says that all are equal. Otherwise, for 3,000 years, there's the only thing, a written word, saying basically people are unequal. So, the reclamation, as Buddha says, will have to start from the self. I have to reject that very ideology which is enslaving me. It has enslaved my generations. And believe that I'm equal. I'm not lower than anyone. I'm not above anyone. And that led me to define who a Dalit is. And I say, I teach others. Dalits are those who believe in equality. Dalits are those who practice equality. And Dalits are those who protest inequality. So today we are all talking about India to be transformed into a Hindu Rashtra. What does that mean? It means the imposition of the caste rule to marginalize the constitution. And this is the struggle which is there today. So Roja rightly says that my believing is not sufficient in themselves. I have to create literature. I have to write books for children. I have to change my songs. I have to change my language. Because it is through socialization and through the language that this value of inequality is continued from generation to generation. I was just reading something yesterday which came up. The National Crime Records Bureau in India, they came out with the numbers of people who commit suicide. About 266,000 plus people have committed suicide in India during 2019. But what is important for us that 66.6% of these people who committed suicide, their income was below 100,000 rupees per year. And 24% of these people are the people who are daily wage earners. So you have a religion saying we are all Hindus, but somebody has multi-billion, beyond imagination kind of resources. And somebody is forced to commit suicide because they have no food. There is something fundamentally wrong with the religion or any religion which cannot address the question of inequality. So whether it is socialization, whether it is our own education, our pedagogy of how to teach our children, all requires to change. And to me, that is a new religion.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you both so much.